the ITV News.
A new royal era, the coronation of King Charles III at Westminster Abbey.
In his name and after his example, I come not to be served but to serve.
The King made his solemn oath in a service steeped in history, a role he spent a lifetime preparing for.
God save the King!
God save the King! I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you.
Prince William led the congregation in paying homage to his father. Also present but removed from the royal front row, a pensive Prince Harry. On the streets and braving some very British weather, thousands gathered to celebrate the new King and Queen.
Not my king! Not my king! Not my king! Not my king!
Among them, voices of dissent too. Dozens of arrests as critics called police tactics alarming. But for tens of thousands outside the palace and for the newly crowned King and Queen, it was a day to remember.
This is ITV News with Mary Nightingale at Buckingham Palace.
Good evening from a rather rainy Buckingham Palace on the day King Charles and Queen Camilla were crowned before the eyes of the world. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey was spectacular, a cocktail of ancient and modern, at times touching and sometimes even emotional. Charles was anointed with holy oil and he swore an oath before the Archbishop of Canterbury placed the crown upon his head to a chorus of God Save the King. Later, tens of thousands of well-wishers converged on Buckingham Palace to cheer the King and the royal family on the balcony. In just a moment, how the crowd celebrated, what it was like to be part of the service, and reaction from across the UK. First, though, here's our correspondent Romilly Weeks on the King's Day of Destiny.
Looking like a man conscious of the weight of history, the King, the Queen beside him in their carriage, leaving the palace so resonant with his mother's reign to take up the mantle of his own. Acknowledging the crowd running the length of the Mall, the procession a patriotic explosion of gold and red and blue. In the Abbey itself, the guest list both smaller and more diverse than the last time Britain put on this particular show. Ordinary people mixing with prime ministers, foreign dignitaries, monarchs, and actors who've played them. A hasty arrival for Andrew, now a bit part player in the royal drama, and for Prince Harry, a lonely entrance, without his wife, missing his son's birthday to witness his father's crowning moment. The Queen, who must have doubted she'd ever be in this position, the comfort of her grandchildren behind her. The King, attended by 9-year-old George. For the Prince and Princess of Wales, a private moment before what's also a rehearsal of their destiny.
Your Majesty, as children of the Kingdom of God, we welcome you in the name of the King of Kings.
In his name and after his example, I come not to be served but to serve.
The humility, a modern addition, but much of this ceremony has echoed through the Abbey, unchanged for centuries.
I here present unto you King Charles, your undoubted king.
God save King Charles.
Hand on the Bible, this promise from the King.
The things which I have herebefore promised, I will perform and keep, so help me God.
In an Anglican ceremony, a Bible reading from Britain's Hindu Prime Minister.
For this cause we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you.
The music chosen by the King, who insisted it should include this gospel choir. If that was not seen at the Queen's coronation, much else was. Charles divested of his robes before the most sacred part of the ceremony. The anointing behind a screen, for a religious king, a moment between him and his God. Sitting in the 700-year-old coronation chair, set on the even more ancient stone of destiny, Charles was presented with the orb, last seen on his mother's coffin.
Receive this orb, set under the cross, and remember always that the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ.
Freighted with symbolism, so much history, tiring for some. The climax of the ceremony, St. Edward's crown placed on the King's head.
God save the king!
God save the King.
Charles looking as though the responsibility, like the crown, is heavy to bear. While George, serious too. As William paid homage to his father and king,
I, William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
a whispered thank you, William, before the hastily changed part of the service, allowing those at home to join in or not.
I now invite those who wish to offer their support to do so.
God save King Charles! God save King Charles!
For the first time since 1937, a Queen consort crowned too. For Camilla's children, it must have been extraordinary to witness. On Charles's side, Prince Harry 2 rows behind William, a reminder of the gulf between the two brothers. The grandchildren faithfully joined in a final rendition of the national anthem. Charlotte sharing a look with her father. In line with the King's wishes, he was greeted by representatives of all faiths before he left the Abbey. Relief the hard part was over, clear on the King's face. In the gold state coach, the glittering splendour of majesty on full show, with a bank of cameras recording for the world. The largest British military ceremonial since 1953. Prince Louis was clearly relishing the ride, with his brother and sister along a route lined with drenched but cheerful crowds. Harry leaving quietly by car, emphasising the different path he has chosen. A procession of bands, swaying cavalry and wet bearskins, stretching a mile long. And joining on horseback, Louis still with plenty to say. Before the carriage returned the King to his birthplace.
3 cheers for His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the Queen! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
As the crowds rushed down the Mall to get a vantage point for this final appearance, the newly crowned King and Queen on the balcony. The day signed off in the skies in red, white and blue. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
Well, our Royal Editor Chris Shipp watched all of today's spectacular events, and he is with me now. And it was quite a show, wasn't it, Chris?
Spectacular it was. And you know, I don't think you need to be the biggest fan of monarchy or the biggest supporter of this particular king to appreciate the magnitude of the moment that he went through today. In that great abbey, you know, where they've crowned kings and queens for the past 1,000 years. And when you are somebody like he is, a man of deep faith, to have that moment, not just the crowning moment there with the Archbishop of Canterbury, but the moment when he was shielded by those anointing screens and having that very private moment between God and the monarch. Those are, you know, indeed a very significant moment for him. He's known this was coming all of his life, of course, but you could see sort of etched on his face the burden of the job that he's already had for 6 or 7 months, of course. But you could see that there, supported by his family, of course, throughout, and not only his children, of course, but his grandchildren, who were yet again a big part of today's commemoration.
Very much so. Obviously, Prince Louis very much at the centre of that, but not a role for Harry, or indeed for Prince Andrew.
No, well, listen, they are the non-working royals, and I think you've got to pick out the very significant difference between the two brothers, William and Harry. There was William today, had a very significant role, paying what's called the homage of royal blood, where he pledges his allegiance to his father, touches the crown, kisses him on the cheek, as we saw. And then Prince Harry there, arriving on his own, sitting 3 rows back with the husband of one of his cousins, and then leaving quite shortly afterwards, getting into a car there and whizzing straight off to Heathrow to go straight back to California. And then the other point to note about working royals is, of course, Prince Andrew, who today was there in his Garter robes, because he is a Knight of the Order of the Garter. That is the highest order of chivalry in this country. You can see him there standing next to Prince Michael of Kent. He chose to wear those robes, but he would have done it with the permission of his brother, the King. Is this a moment to start softening that approach to Prince Andrew, which the King has refused to consider thus far?
Interesting to observe. And unexpected star of today, Penny Mordaunt.
Yes. Now listen, when you're the leader of the House of Commons, you're also the leader of the Privy Council, the president of the Privy Council. And her role today, where she was just literally in nearly all the shots, carrying that sword of state. She's spoken before about having to do press-ups in order to carry that sword in the way that she did there, yeah. And for so long as well. And a lot of the talk on social media, both during and after that very unique and solemn ceremony, was about the the role that she played, Penny Mordaunt, leader of the House of Commons, and you know, a surprise talking point, I suppose, Mary, at the end of this remarkable day.
Yeah, it really was. Well, we'll have more time to chat at the end of the programme. For the moment, though, Chris, thank you very much. And there were more than 2,000 guests inside the Abbey today who witnessed the coronation firsthand. Guests from all walks of life, charity workers, military veterans, rubbing shoulders with celebrities and royalty. It reflected the King's desire to make his reign an inclusive one. Sejal Karia heard from some of those lucky enough to have a ringside seat.
In the splendour of the Abbey, at the lavish spectacle of the crowning of a king, amidst royalty, celebrities and world leaders, a reflection of a modern nation. Even those used to the red carpet, thrilled to be part of this moment.
You're part of history. It's fantastic. So we're just happy to be invited.
Oh, we're cock-a-hoop. Absolutely cock-a-hoop.
Everybody was, I thought, completely invested in what was happening in there. The king was nervous and I could feel that, you know, the weight of what he was taking on was there. Everything conspired to make it emotional and I fell for it.
Also celebrating with the king, local heroes. From fundraisers to firefighters, from carers to community workers. Ordinary people who've done extraordinary things, who can say they were there.
What's the best bit of the ceremony? Best bit of the ceremony? The crowning.
Normally, Grace, Amel and Jess would be teaching inner city children the joy of riding horses. Today, they were among those specially chosen by the King and Queen to a private screening of the coronation on the grounds of the Abbey.
One of my favourite moments was when they walked around the Queen's, the late Queen's memorial. I think that was really sweet and it brought some tears to my eyes.
It makes me feel like recognised as a young person to know that we were chosen especially for such an amazing event, a historical event as well. When we all chanted God Save the King, it felt like quite powerful.
Also invited Sahil Usman, who, being treated for leukemia during lockdown, still created and delivered food hampers for elderly people in Blackburn. He had a front row seat.
If I do end up having kids in the future, it's like a moment in history that I can tell them about, that I attended that event.
The ceremony and rituals of coronation largely unchanged for hundreds of years, but today, including people of a 21st century Britain. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Tens of thousands of people lined the route of the procession, some having camped out for days to get a good spot. They came from near and far to cheer on the King, and even some very British weather did not dampen their spirits. Geraint Vincent heard their stories.
The day of the coronation has dawned, and on the Mall, if you're not still sleeping, you're singing.
I've done some traditional Mauritian food. I've got the chili cakes. I've got bhaji's. Do you want some?
No, it's too early for a bhaji, I think.
I was here 70 years ago in exactly the same position.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, I was here inside Clarence House, but I was on the curb, right on the curb.
This is definitely your first coronation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how excited are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Like 11.
Let's see your excited face.
The rain started early and didn't stop, so when the King and Queen went past on their way to the Abbey, the crowd put down their brollies and held up their phones.
Did you see anything when they went past?
Yeah, we saw the carriage.
On a phone.
Yeah, yeah.
I like your poncho.
Thank you. You can't have it. Can't miss it.
There were big screens to watch the service, and in the parks they sang the hymns. And in sacred moments for the sovereign, some shed a tear.
Oh, really moving, quite emotional.
Yeah.
Just the atmosphere has been brilliant, despite the weather and the rain. It's just been beautiful to see.
I'm a Church of England priest, so I'm very familiar with this, but to see this at the heart of the nation's life again is really special for me.
With the King back at the palace, the crowds came together again.
Where have you come from today?
Sheffield.
Sheffield.
Yeah.
You've been,
We've been here since 6 o'clock this morning. Bethany and Olivia's seen everything because it's been some of the railings. Charlotte and I've seen nothing.
Oh.
So this is really exciting now.
Well, you're in the right spot now.
Absolutely. Woo!
What kind of day are you having?
Absolutely splendid. It's been wonderful experience. Just making a joyous occasion of what today has been a splendid day.
Outside the palace on the day they crowned the king, together they saw a page of history turn and a new age begin. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
The police operation surrounding today's events was one of the UK's biggest ever, and Scotland Yard has been criticised over the arrest of a number of protesters hours before the coronation took place. Excuse me, members of the Republic group were detained close to Trafalgar Square at 7 o'clock this morning. There were 52 arrests. Here's our global security editor, Rohit Kachru.
There was another procession along the Mall this morning. The protesters marched away to the beat of the drum before the king had even left for the Abbey. We were arrested for having T-shirts and flags, she says. Just Stop Oil and anti-monarchy protesters were among those detained.
I'll defend your right to celebrate, you defend our right to protest.
But some campaigners said the police were heavy-handed.
The right to protest is a fundamental human right, and it's outrageous that the police have arrested the CEO of the campaign group Republic, confiscated all the placards, and then erected these gigantic barriers in front of the protest to stop us being seen.
Officers have been given new powers this week to police protests, and they've said they'd have low tolerance for disruptive behaviour. With many officers wearing traditional hats in the drizzling rain, this looks in places like a ceremonial operation, but Scotland Yard have said it is much more than that. But one human rights group said the police's behaviour today was like something seen in Moscow. They're accused tonight of overreaching.
We all have the right to go out and protest, and we should keep doing that. And actually, it's the government's duty to facilitate that and provide the landscape for our rights being upheld instead of taking them away, as we've seen this week and as we've seen today.
The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police said tonight that the force is proud to have led the largest policing operation in decades, adding, God save the King. Rohit Kachru, ITV News at Buckingham Palace.
The coronation was a moment to be celebrated or, in some cases, ignored by people right across the UK. It made some of us feel proud to be British, others were just glad for an excuse for a get-together, and a few felt it sent out entirely the wrong message at a time of great difficulty for many in the country. John Ray heard the reaction of people right across Britain.
In the Liverpool pub that bears his name, they put out the flags and raised their glasses. As important as the formalities in London have been the festivities in every corner of the land.
I just love it. No one does it like the British do. It's just the pomp, the ceremony, the watching it, the being involved. It's just, I love it.
So from big screens in Belfast and the breadth of the kingdom to a street party and celebratory spread in Manchester, this was a coronation for a less reserved, less deferential era.
It's a nice thing to happen. Some people don't agree with it. Personally, I do. That's just the way it is, but I think it's a good thing for the country.
In Hertfordshire, they braved the rain. Plastic Macs and brollies were the day's dress code.
Very relieved to be alive to see it, having seen the first one of the Queen.
It really did suit the occasion. I thought that everything was beautifully done. King Charles looked absolutely fantastic.
Windswept Wales, where they watched the monarch make his vows. But amid the many well-wishers, some protest and evidence that his is not an entirely united kingdom.
It doesn't make sense for the government to be spending millions of public money on a coronation when there's a cost of living crisis and so many people are struggling.
Ardent royalist or committed republican, the nation's mood can be hard to judge. In Edinburgh, we found those who just wanted something to celebrate.
We just wanted to kind of come and be a part of it all and see what the vibe was like.
Like I say, I came for the picnic, really.
A global audience measured in millions, but it meant most to the few hundred who gathered in Cleethorpes or ate cream tea and built castles on the Cornish sands.
I've been making crowns.
In Bristol, a little more magical make-believe.
Whatever you think of the royals, I think it's something very important to our nationhood.
A day making memories designed to last. The story of a king's coronation. To tell our children and in turn for them to tell theirs. John Ray, ITV News.
Back to Royal Editor Chris Shipp. And this is going to be the battle, isn't it, that's going to define this king's reign, is how to retain support.
I think so. I mean, I don't know about you, Mary, but I'm always surprised when I see that people have been camping in the Mall behind us, not for a few hours, but for days on end. Some of them got there.
Rain.
Yeah, despite the rain today, and they've been there all week. But there's a different crowd here. These are people who have chosen to come here because they wanted to see everything today: the carriages, the King, the Queen, that balcony moment, the crowns, and all the rest of it. But I think that the job for the King now, if you want to define it in those terms, is to try and make this himself, the monarch, and the monarchy relevant to the whole country. We're talking about all corners of the country and all generations as well. And that piece of work, I think, now has to get underway with speed. Yes, he's been king since last September, but I think now for him, he's got to focus on what is he going to do? What is this reign going to look like?
And I just wonder, Chris, today was magnificent, the spectacle, the pomp, the ceremony, all of that. Do you think we can see another coronation like this going forward?
Well, look, they've done them pretty successfully time after time since 1066, and we had another one today. And every time there's a coronation, there are new elements of modernity. I think a lot of people might have watched that today and thought it didn't look very modern to me. It looked very old. It looked like not dissimilar to how it would for William the Conqueror. But you've got to wonder, what will it look like for King William V? Will there be a coronation? And what changes will there be then to reflect the society in which we will be when he has his moment, like his father did today?
Fascinating stuff. Chris, thank you. And that brings our special programme to a close on the day the nation crowned a new king. He left his birthplace, Buckingham Palace, this morning for the final part of a journey he'd been preparing for his entire life. The King and Queen Camilla were cheered on their way by tens of thousands of well-wishers lining the rainy streets. As the world watched, they were joined inside Westminster Abbey by other members of the royal family. And although Prince Harry was there, he came and he left alone. In a ceremony both ancient and modern and rich with symbolism, Charles was anointed with holy oil before the crown was placed upon his head. The Abbey rang out with a chorus of God Save the King. After the procession returned, huge crowds converged on Buckingham Palace, cheering as King Charles, Queen Camilla and other working members of the royal family made the traditional appearance on the balcony. A moment of history heralding a new king and a new era. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.